All right, hello, welcome to Unit 2 of EQ 111. I'm glad you're here. You've made it through the first week of the class. Congratulations. I hope assignments are making sense to you and that the readings are helpful and that things are coming together and that you're starting to get the feel for how this class is going to operate. Just as I've been saying throughout the class, this moves quickly, right? So we're in week 2 and we are already almost halfway through the class. We'll be approaching that here in week 3 with our midterm. So it moves quickly, right? So if you have questions or if you're having issues, don't wait to reach out. Please reach out as soon as possible and we can have a conversation. I have office hours throughout the week and I'm always available to set up time by appointment if one of those times doesn't work for you. So as a note, keep working on those case studies that you're doing in groups. I know some people are having issues with scheduling and coordinating schedules. If that's the case, just reach out to me and I'm happy to help you figure out a way to make it possible for everyone to have their voice heard as they're doing the case study assignment. There are some things that we can do to work with different schedules. So reach out if you have any questions or any issues, please. So we've got for this week, the assignment list is really similar to what we were doing last week, right? We're just doing some different readings and some similar kind of main assignments though. So you're reading chapters 9 through 13 of Crucial Conversations, chapters 1 through 5 of Thanks for the Feedback. There's a lot here. I know it's a lot of reading material, but again, this is an accelerated class and we're trying to get it all in here. And a lot of this will show up on your midterm and your final. So it is important to do the readings. You are watching Unit 2 of the introductory video. That's this one. Yay! Check that off the list. You're doing your C and Qs for Unit 2. I'm really encouraged as I've been hearing some feedback from you all and seeing some of the assignments that you did for week 1. I like what I'm seeing. If you have questions, please reach out. Your attendance and participation discussion boards for Unit 2, and then your second case study. All of that will be due, I believe it's the July 2nd, next Sunday. So reach out again if you have questions. I'm always willing to help wherever is needed. So what I want to start with here, I'm going to pull up our PowerPoint for the day. Let me go ahead and try to share my screen. That'll make it easier for you to see what I'm seeing. It'd be horrible if I do the whole lecture and you don't get to see the PowerPoint, but I think you see it. That would just not be good. All right, so we're going to go ahead and share this. Got it. Okay, and I'm going to make it large screen so you can see it. So here we go. Crucial Conversations and workplace, in the workplace and public civility. So these chapters are touching on a broad variety of themes. And what I'm doing with these lectures is to touch on some of them and pull out some of the key toolkits, some of the key ideas that are really helpful from these readings. You should be doing the reading on your own, but this is kind of a best of sort of hits. And I'm touching on a lot of things here that may appear in quizzes or in your midterm and your final. They aren't officially quizzes. That's what I'm referring to as your midterm or your final. So don't panic if you're like, where's the quiz? No, it's your midterm or your final. And but there are also some things that appear in the books that won't appear in my lectures. So those things might also appear on the midterm or the final. So kind of keep that in mind. But here are some things that really stood out to me about this. And I'm fitting it within this context of trying to talk about these themes within the idea of the workplace. What does it mean to work with people? And what does it mean to have crucial conversations with the people that we work with? So it was the middle of the pandemic. I don't know how many of you were in high school or maybe even middle school for some of you for when the pandemic started, and things changed all of a sudden, right? Everybody went online. There were a bunch of different things that had a particular flow or rhythm, and overnight things are different. At the time, I was working for an organization here in Pittsburgh. It was a nonprofit foundation. And I was a fellow at the organization. And I had just started working for them in the middle of January. And then all of this starts hitting in March, right, of 2020. And I'm still trying to understand and get a feel for the flow of the office, for the work pace. And all of a sudden, boom, we're in the middle of something that had been unprecedented in my lifetime up to that point. And for me, I think the most difficult thing about all of that was learning to navigate difficult conversations in the midst of all that other stuff. There was one time in particular, so we were doing a series of roundtables. The foundation I worked for does a lot of educational training for nonprofit leaders, a whole bunch of resourcing and making things just more accessible to a bunch of small nonprofits, a lot of resources. And we were hosting these roundtable events throughout the year. And we were advertising our first one. And this was going out to a lot of important people that I wanted to impress. I was working on behalf of my boss, who was somebody who was really connected to the school that I was going to. So there's just a lot riding on it. And I remember I got all the material out, put it all together, got approval. It was going ahead, and we pressed play on the whole campaign. We're promoting this big roundtable, and we're sending it out all over the region. And then I get this call, and it's from my boss, and she says, "Did you send that out already?" I'm like, "Yeah, I did. What's wrong?" And she's like, "Well, you said it was for free, and it actually is not for free. There's a cost for this event." And yeah. I'm like, oh no. So I have this horrible realization that I'd messed it up on the promotional stuff. And I had said that this event was free when in reality it cost money to attend. So we had to backtrack with our partners, and I just had a sense of just my stomach dropping, right? Because it was a pretty significant amount of money that we were going to be losing out on. And in the nonprofit world, every little bit counts. So it was one of those moments where, yeah, I really wanted to stick my head in the sand and avoid the conversation, but we had to figure out what we were going to do with it. And we came to this moment where crucial conversations were important. You've probably already encountered some of those moments in your workplace where something falls apart. Maybe it's on you, maybe it's somebody else. It could be 100 different reasons, but something goes wrong. And what do you do with it? Do you just try to make it right and hope nobody notices? Do you hide it? Do you talk about it? Do you deal with it? One of the best bosses I ever had was someone who said that failure was okay. And he made it really clear that you should do your work and you should do it well. You should take ownership for it. And he kind of threw you into the deep end without giving you a whole lot of instruction sometimes. But the saving grace about him is that he never penalized failure. He never he tried really hard not to make you feel badly about failure, and instead he really worked hard to make it clear that failure wouldn't be punished, but it would be met with support and with trying to make things right. And that allowed for an openness in the workplace to have crucial conversations when mistakes were made and to be able to keep moving forward. So the big idea I want to tackle here that we see kind of scattered throughout our readings, and it's related back to workplace civility and difficult conversations in the workplace, is this idea of public civility. And that when we practice public civility in the workplace, that goes beyond just simply liking someone, saying, oh, they're cool, I like hanging out with them. It goes beyond that, and it creates room for giving and receiving feedback from a place of common purpose or common ground that's crucial for the functioning of the organization or community. If we only worked with people that we liked, if we only kind of had that as a thing that brought us together, it would be difficult. And it would cause us to get into this place where we're afraid of telling people things because we're afraid they might not like us, right? And I know that that's been a thing for me in my life, and I know it is for others too. Some of you may not struggle with that in the same way, and that's okay. But there are a lot of things that might keep us from crucial conversations in the workplace, and we're going to figure out some of the coordinates to help us navigate that here together. So first of all, how do you work with someone you don't like in the workplace? This is a big one, right? I don't know if you've ever had a coworker that you don't like that you've worked with. When I was in high school and then college, I started a rock band and we toured across the country and made 3 albums, did several national tours, and it was a business, right? We ran this business, and it was my livelihood for 5-6 years. And I started the band with a person who I didn't like at first. I mean, not always a great idea. Hey, let's spend a lot of time together, and we don't like each other, right? But this person was someone who's opposite from me in so many different ways. We had very little in common. I think the only thing we had in common was music, and I kind of shared a faith background, but there was a lot of differences there too. And we got to this place where we I'll never forget it. Like we had arguments all the time, and back and forth over sometimes important things, sometimes silly things, but it was like one of those situations where you everything about this other person offends you, right? And I think everything about me offended this other person too. We were just so very, very different. But there were 2 things that kind of helped me to get to a place where I learned to value this person. And actually, we eventually became very good friends, but it happened not from a place of liking this person at first, but from a place of learning to trust them and learning to come around the work that we were doing together, right? And those 2 moments, one was a moment where I it was like one of those things that happens with siblings, right? Where like I'm an older sibling, and so there are these moments where it's like sometimes I tease my siblings and pick on them probably more than I should have when I was a kid, honestly. But if anybody else tried to tease them or pick on them, that person's not gonna not gonna be able to do that, right? So it was kind of like that with in this friendship that I had, this workplace sort of friendship, where there was this moment where we were touring and we were hanging out with some people after a show, and this one person was pushing at me and really kind of doing a little bit of bullying. And this was a person I didn't know very well at the time, someone who had been at our show. And my bandmate came in and said, no, I'd never seen anybody get so angry on my behalf before and stand up for me. And it was really interesting, right? And so that was a moment where I realized, oh, we might not like each other all the time, but we are working towards the same goal and we're building trust with each other, right? And another moment was we were at the end of a long tour. It was about 6-7 months on the road together, kind of constantly. And we'd gotten so frustrated with each other. We were having trouble talking with each other. And we both knew that couldn't continue. So we had this moment where we set up a meeting, we sat down in our trailer and we talked. And I shared what I was feeling. He shared what he was feeling. We started crying, and it was the sort of thing where it was like, okay, we need to figure this out. We need to sort it out. And for us, that looked like forgiveness. We were both able to forgive each other and to try to acknowledge each other, and then kind of commit to grow with each other. But all of that to say is we don't always have to like the people that we work with. We have to be able to come around a common center. We talked about some of this, I think, in our last discussion, but this idea, some of this came from Martin Buber, some of this from Ronald C. Arnett. Arnett especially brought it into the conversation around organizations, but these common centers are places that we can agree on something together to get things done, right? So in a business, in a workplace, the goal is to often make money, and you have a mission that you're working at, especially in nonprofit organizations, right? But those common centers can help people navigate things when there's not a personal liking, right? Have you been in a situation before where you had a coworker who you wouldn't choose to hang out with, but you can work well together because you have a common goal, right? It's that idea. How do we find what the organization is, to use terms from communication ethics, which is something you might hear more about if you take other communication classes? What goods are being protected and promoted? These are values or things that are important that mean a lot to a group of people or to an organization, and they're protected and they're promoted, right? So at Duquesne University, a good that's protected and promoted is the good of learning, right? We are here to learn together, and you may be in groups where you like everybody, which I hope is the case, but you may be in some groups where you find it difficult to work with someone. And if that's the case, that's okay. We don't have to like everyone we work with, but we do need to be polite, we need to be civil, and we need to come around the common good. The common good in that case, in a group, would be completing the case study and completing the work that was assigned, because the common good that's being protected and promoted at Duquesne and in our class is that of learning, right? So the feedback cure, this was something that I found was really interesting in our reading for the week. So feedback cure is this process for dealing with crucial conversations and receiving feedback. And these are some quick reminders when you're in the process of feedback, which can be hard to receive, right? Especially if we already don't necessarily like the person. It can feel offensive. It can feel kind of an attack, a personal attack. But what we need to do is collect ourselves, right? Collect yourself. Remember what it is that creates a crucial conversations. We talked about that last week with stakes being high, emotions running strong, and there's an urgency to things. So just step back from things for a second and collect yourself. Be able to identify what it is that's going on. Then try to understand, right, your viewpoint, but also a little bit of where the other person might be coming from. If you need to, you can take some time to recover, right? Give some space, some distance between yourself and the conversation. Say, hey, I need to take 5 minutes here and just take a quick break. Can we come right back to this? Or set up another meeting for a little later down the road if you have to, right? And then you engage, right? You engage in the actual feedback that the person is giving you. You acknowledge what they're saying. You accept where appropriate, right? The feedback. And then you commit to making changes, to learning and to growing from that feedback, right? It's not an easy process, but it's one that's really important for our development in the workplace and for us to be able to keep coming around these common centers and working together. And then finally, there's this idea of shifting from an attitude that says, that's wrong when you receive feedback, right? This kind of immediate defensive sort of posture, and instead say, tell me more, right? Instead of being defensive, it's responding with curiosity. Yeah, well, what could be going on here? Why are you saying that? What is it that I do that makes you feel that way, right? These kinds of questions, not spoken out of a place of defensiveness, but out of curiosity, right? Wanting to learn more in order to grow. So some basic coordinates for learning how to work with people that we don't like, but also there's this idea of handling feedback in a workplace environment, which kind of ties in with some of this, right? And there are 3 big triggers that are mentioned in the book, Thanks for the Feedback, which is kind of fun having these 2 back-to-back crucial conversations and Thanks for the Feedback, where we're discussing some similar themes with some different approaches, right? But the 3 triggers that they mention in Thanks for the Feedback include truth triggers, relationship triggers, and identity triggers. So truth triggers have to do with the content. Maybe the content of the critique isn't true, or it's unhelpful, or it's kind of just plain wrong, right? We feel like, hey, that's not true. I got feedback once in a class I was teaching, and I immediately, when you hear something and you're like, oh, that's not true. There was something that I was engaging with, and I was like, oh, I don't think I do that. And I had to take a step back and I had to go, okay, wait, where is this coming from? There's obviously an issue here. And the perception, even if I don't think this is factually true, this person's perception about me is coming from somewhere. And so how do I acknowledge that and try to engage with what they're saying, right? The other trigger that's possible is a relationship trigger, right? So relationship triggers have to do with the person offering the feedback. Back to the idea of liking or not liking someone, right? It may be as simple as that, or it may be this idea of authority. Like they don't have the right to speak that to me, or to try to critique that about my work or my life, right? It's this idea of questioning the validity of someone else's voice to speak that feedback. And there are times where that is appropriate, but we can also kind of back out of legitimate feedback because of those relationship triggers. The next is the identity trigger, which has to do with us, right? So what is it that is keeping us internally from accepting that feedback and being able to apply it to our lives? So finally, there's this idea of building resiliency, or building, how would you even call it? It's almost like, it's almost like the feedback process, and being open to the feedback process allows us to grow what the author Brene Brown calls she calls it a strong back and a soft front, is what she talks about this. Almost like picture a porcupine, right? Although that's a little prickly, maybe an armadillo or another animal, right? Where you have this strong, tough skin on the outside, right, on your back. You've got a strong back. You can carry a lot, but when you get down to who you are, you're not jaded, and you have the ability to respond with care and authenticity, right? So it's both going in hand, and learning to receive feedback is an important way of being able to develop this functional dealing with things that are hard, and yet being able to do so in a way that's not brittle, not just speaking out of being triggered by these things we talked about, but being able to actually engage with the feedback for what it is, right? And that's part of developing those really muscles around that. This is a form of resiliency personally, right? To be able to receive feedback and give it well, but also as you have more and more people in an organization or a community that have these skills, it's about developing organizational resiliency. When you have an organization that is responsive to feedback and to the needs of other people and to the needs of stakeholders and customers and coworkers, then you begin to have an organization that becomes more resilient, becomes more flexible, nimbler, right? And so there's this idea of building resiliency, and that lends itself to what authors Matthew Seeger and Timothy Selnow call narratives of renewal. And narratives of renewal have specifically to do with crises, right? I don't know if you've ever been in a crisis. Well, in fact, many of us have with the pandemic, right? That was a crisis that shut down all of our school system, our school systems, our workplaces. We were inside for months. That was a crisis, right? And in crisis, there are many different kinds of ways of engaging with crisis. We can blame other people for them. We can avoid them, right? We can have a lot of different ways of engaging with them. But Seeger and Selnow talk about this idea of renewal and working towards renewal in the midst of crisis, being the kind of organization that doesn't just bounce back and be resilient, but also can come to the crisis and out of that crisis emerge healthier, stronger, being able to be ready for what's next in a way that they weren't before. And a large part of that, some of their studies and others around resilience and renewal literature would look at this idea of being able to engage authentically with each other and being able to point to something that is not just positive on the other side of crisis, conflict, but is actually better, right? It's better than where we started. Engaging with conflict, engaging with difficult conversations in a workplace setting has the possibility to not only resolve those issues, but to help us to be stronger as a group of people, right? So I'd like to stop there for the day. A lot of themes here, but the big takeaways are that we can learn to work with, to engage with people that we might not like. We can learn to take feedback and apply it into our lives without being triggered by these different things that come up, right? And for me, I'm going back to our original story where I was working as a fellow and I messed up this big roundtable session we had. It was actually a really good learning moment for me because I was able to talk about my mistake honestly with my boss and not avoid the situation, thankfully. And she responded with a lot of grace and also a willingness to just get us back on track. We came up with a solution that we were not going to charge for those roundtables that we've been advertising. We were going to possibly in the future, but we were going to use this as an opportunity to bring in more people who may not have attended the event if it had been charged for. And it was actually really successful. And it was even better. Like when COVID hit, we were able to be a little more responsive because we weren't dependent on that money. And so it turned out being okay, but it took having those uncomfortable conversations with me. I think I even told her at one point, hey, if this needs to come out of my paycheck, I'm willing to do it because we're losing a lot of money here. And I really didn't want that to happen, but I was willing to try and make it right. And we were able to, she was able to give some feedback to me, right? Saying, hey, let's have a system for double checking these things before we send them out. And I was able to receive that. So feedback, it's important. It's not always easy, but it's the sort of thing that can help our communication and help us to develop more resilient, healthier organizations and workplaces. All right. Thank you so much. Reach out if you have questions. Hope you have a good time working on the material for Unit 2, and we'll see you next time.